The darkness felt different that night. It was a quiet so profound it seemed to breathe. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled my very soul, that I was standing on the edge of a cliff I never meant to find. This, I didn't see it coming. And yet somehow, I still blame myself. Because I let it get too close. Was it love? Was it guilt? Or was it a betrayal so profound I still don't have a name for it? I still wake in the dead of night, gasping, wondering what exactly I missed. What I allowed. What broken, hungry part of me wanted to be wanted again, even if that want came from a place that was utterly, unforgivably wrong. This is the part of the story most people will never understand. But maybe you will. Maybe someone listening has been where I've been, felt that cavernous, aching need to feel alive again, to be touched, to be heard, to be noticed, even when the source of that attention makes your very identity crumble to dust. So I'm telling this, not just to lift the weight from my chest, but because secrets like these, they fester in silence. They grow teeth. And I have been silent for far too long. If you think you know what comes next, you don't. You couldn't possibly. So pull close. Listen. Because this story is where my old life ended. When my marriage ended, I didn't cry. There was no screaming, no shattered plates, no dramatic slamming of doors. There was just silence. A silence so loud it echoed through every hollow room of that house. A silence that didn't just fill the air, it seeped into the walls. It settled deep into my bones. Years, a lifetime of years, gone. Erased by a single, casual sentence from him. I just don't feel it anymore. As if I were a season he had simply outgrown. We signed the final papers on a day of endless weeping rain. I remember watching the streams of water blur the world outside the window, and thinking how perfectly it mirrored the drowned world within me. Drenched, heavy, a landscape of unrelenting gray. He left. He moved to another life in another state with a younger, brighter shadow by his side. And in the strangest way, that was a relief. At last, I had a villain, something solid to blame. But his leaving, it didn't bring freedom. It brought a hollowing. I felt like a house that had been stripped bare, robbed of everything of value. My worth, my joy, my very essence, gone. I tried to keep up appearances, for the neighbors, for the empty calendar. But inside, I was unraveling. A single, fragile thread coming loose, and then another, and another. And then there was my son. My beautiful, warm-hearted boy, 27 years old, with a smile that held the ghost of his father, but eyes that were infinitely softer, kinder. He moved back to town, said he wanted to be close, to help. And God help me, I let him. I needed him. He became my anchor in a sea of numbness. He filled the grocery cart, fixed the creaking step on the porch. He made tea in the fragile hours past midnight when the silence became a scream. He would hold my hand, and I would cling to it. Because after years of being untouched, of being unseen, That simple human contact felt like a lifeline thrown into a stormy sea. He looked at me, not with pity, but with a fierce, aching attention that made me feel real again. He asked, "How are you really?" And he meant it. And I told him. I told him everything. Our bond, it deepened. It thickened. At first, it felt like salvation, a mother and son healing together from a shared wound. But then, the texture of it began to change. I started to notice things. Glances that lingered in the air between us a moment too long. A touch on the shoulder that slid ever so slightly down my arm. Conversations that dove into depths where we had no business swimming. I'd catch him staring, not with a son's pride, but with something closer to wonder, to awe. And for a woman who had been erased, who felt invisible in her own skin, that attention, it was a drug. It was sunlight on frozen ground. I told myself I was imagining it. I told myself it was just his protective heart. But a seed of knowing, dark and quiet, had been planted in the deepest part of me. My sister saw it first. She visited one afternoon, her eyes sharp with a sister's intuition. As we washed dishes, she said the words that made my blood run cold. "He looks at you funny." I froze, the plate in my hand almost slipping away. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice a thin thread of sound. She just shrugged, her eyes not leaving mine. "Like he's always watching you. Like he's worried. Or something else." I laughed it off, a brittle, hollow sound. But that night, sleep was a distant country. Her words echoed, and all those tiny, ignored moments came rushing back in a torrent. The way he'd brush my hair from my face with a tenderness that felt intimate. The way he'd say, "You deserve the world," with an intensity that vibrated in the air. The time he called me beautiful, and then stammered, correcting himself, but the word had already hung there, shimmering and wrong. I said nothing. I did nothing. Because a terrible, shameful part of me was curious. I was starving, and he was offering a feast. I was so tired of being the strong one, the discarded one, the ghost in my own life. Have you ever had someone become the very oxygen you breathe? So essential to your survival that you stop asking if the air is poison? That was him. That was me. Then, he asked me to dinner. "Just us," he said, his eyes bright. "Somewhere nice. You deserve a night where you don't have to think." I hesitated, a flutter of warning in my chest. But his smile was so warm, so open, and I was so very, very lonely. I said yes. The night arrived. He texted me, "Wear the black dress, the one from your birthday. You looked beautiful in it." Beautiful. I stood before my mirror for a long time, my reflection a stranger's. Why was my heart pounding? Why were my hands trembling as I applied my lipstick? When he saw me, his breath caught. I saw it, a flash of something raw and unmasked in his eyes before he composed himself. The car ride was a quiet hum of tension. He took me to a restaurant bathed in soft, golden light, a place of whispered secrets and candlelit corners. It was the kind of place for lovers. We sat in a velvet-draped booth, a world away from everyone. He listened to me as if my every word was a treasure. He laughed, his gaze never leaving my face. And then, he reached across the table. His hand covered mine. His skin was warm. His touch was firm. "You really do look beautiful tonight," he said, his voice low, a private rumble that vibrated through my very core. I should have pulled away. I told myself to pull away. But I didn't. I was trapped, not by his grip, but by the years of neglect that made his focused attention feel like a miracle. He spoke then, of the past, of hearing me cry through his bedroom wall as a boy, of vowing to himself that he would never let anyone hurt me again. "You were the only one who ever made me feel safe," he confessed, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "And I want to be that for you now." The air left the room. My vision tunneled. This was no longer a son comforting his mother. This was something else, something perilous and profound. And the most terrifying part? A traitorous part of my own shattered heart was leaning in. Then, he placed the box between us. Small, velvet. "I have something for you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. Inside was my grandmother's locket. A piece of my history, my very soul, I thought was lost forever. My breath hitched. "How did you—" I couldn't finish. His eyes held mine, captive. "You deserve to feel loved again," he said, each word a deliberate, devastating blow. "Truly loved. The way you should have been all along." Time fractured. The noise of the restaurant melted into a distant murmur. There was only the candlelight flickering in his earnest, desperate eyes, the weight of the antique gold in my palm, and the horrifying, electric charge in the space between our bodies. He leaned closer, so close I could see the faint stubble on his cheek, so close I could feel the heat radiating from him. His gaze dropped to my lips. My heart was a wild, frantic drum against my ribs. Every instinct screamed for me to run, to shatter this moment into 1,000 irreparable pieces. But my body, my lonely, aching, touch-starved body, did not move. It was as if I were carved from stone, paralyzed by conflict, by a longing so deep and shameful it stole the very breath from my lungs. His hand rose. His fingertips grazed my cheek. A touch so reverent, so intimate, it finally broke the spell. I flinched, a violent, involuntary recoil. I shoved my chair back, the legs screeching against the floor like a scream. The sound shattered the delicate bubble of our shared madness. I stood, trembling from head to toe, the locket biting into my clenched fist. He looked up, his face a mask of stunned confusion and dawning horror. "I just wanted," he began, his voice cracking. I didn't wait to hear the rest. I turned, and I walked. I walked away from the table, from the restaurant, from the sun I no longer knew how to look in the eye. I burst out into the cold night air, gasping as if I'd been drowning. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears. When I finally stumbled through my own front door, I locked it, as if I could lock out the truth of what had just transpired. But the truth was inside me now. It had taken root. I have not spoken to him since. His texts go unanswered. His knocks at the door go unheeded. I once watched from the shadows as he stood on my porch, shoulders slumped, a figure of equal parts hope and despair. He slipped a note under the door. It sits unread in a drawer. I cannot bear its weight. The locket, it lives in my jewelry box. I cannot wear it. I cannot throw it away. It is a symbol of a love that is both the purest and most polluted thing I have ever known. Now, I am left alone with the wreckage, with the questions that have no answers. Did I fail as a mother? Or was I simply a woman so shattered by abandonment that I mistook a son's devotion for a lover's salvation? The line between them didn't vanish in a single moment at that candlelit table. No, it was eroded, day by day, smile by smile, touch by touch. A slow, sweet, terrifying slide into a place from which there is no clean return. I look in the mirror now, and I do not recognize the woman staring back. She is a stranger, haunted by a hunger she should never have fed. She is a mother who has lost her son, and a woman who, for one fleeting, disgraceful moment, remembered what it felt like to be desired. And that is the truth that will haunt me for the rest of my days. The cliff's edge is behind me now. I have already fallen, and I am still, forever, falling.